Good afternoon. Thank you for attending this kit webinar series. Today we're going to be looking at the Appliance Sizing Tool, which is a tool that we utilize in order to get a rough understanding of what a customer of ours is going to be looking for when it comes to our appliances. As you can see here, I've logged into the partner portal, and that's very easily accessible by going to your user center account, logging in, and then from there you will just go to Sell and select Appliance Sizing Tool. Before we get to that, there's a couple of kind of simple things to understand. First and foremost, we can do a sizing exercise via the actual portal here by just putting in the gateway throughput or total users, or we can work with the CP Size Me file. And for those of you not familiar with the CP Size Me file, in essence, what it is a tool that you can run on an existing checkpoint appliance, let it run there for a day or so, and then take the output and then upload the output to the Appliance Sizing Tool. I'm not going to go through every kind of element of the document, but there are ways in which you can do this manually or you can do it automatically. But you can see here the links to download the scripts are here. And then we take you through a step-by-step process in terms of running that and then getting the output. As I said, you can either automatically upload then the CP info file from the security gateway, or you can work with the offline options where you can actually get the file, get a copy of the file, and then upload the XML file to the AST tool. Today, we're just going to be focusing on the Appliance Sizing Tool utilization from kind of very much an initial kind of gauging perspective. And so the idea here is to look and make a core decision first and foremost. What is it the customer is looking to utilize? And we have that broken down into our Gen 5 security, next generation firewall, NGFW, firewall and IPS, or firewall only. And by selecting one of these options, the relevant kind of appliances may change, because what we're ultimately looking to do is ensure that we can cater for the traffic needs of the customer. What are the traffic needs, I hear you ask? Well, over here, if we look at the methodology, it will open up this link here. And then what this will do is it will give you a breakdown of how we work, what our test methodology is to arrive at the various different decisions that we have in relation to what we need. So again, looking through this, you can see how we've worked it, how we deal with it, and then how we arrive at the actual conclusions to the appliance that we're recommending. So what I'm going to work with in general is the Gen 5 security. Now that is our full threat prevention suite with or without sandblast. So that's running firewall, IPS, application control, URL filtering, anti-bot, antivirus, and then either with or without the sandblast technology. The reason we can do it with or without is because there isn't too much of a lift for running sandblast on the appliance over and above not running sandblast. Now, it should be said at this point that, you know, if we're looking at massive amount of mail throughputs, then we might need to look at a slightly different approach or ensure that we're taking some of those outliers into account. But for most scenarios, the Gen 5 security with or without sandblast should be fine. Moving down from that, as I said, we have NGFW, next generation firewall, which includes firewall, IPS, and application control. The core things to remember when we're doing this is that the more we turn on, the more we're asking the box to do. And that's really what it's about. So that's why we'll see when we start to go through some of the throughput elements that, you know, the requirements of the appliance may rise or get smaller depending on what our throughput is. And again, the more bits we're asking it to do, the more features we're turning on, blades, if you will, or security features, the more we're asking the box to do. So if we start with Gen 5 security, and then we'll take maybe about 300 megs of traffic. I literally just select, put in 300 megs here, hit calculate, and then you can see we then have recommendations that are coming out in relation to that. Now, what this says here is that 3600 is a recommended appliance for us, obviously. Threat prevention throughput has a maximum of 718 megs. Firewall bandwidth, 4 gigs. Port density, and then the room for growth is key to that as well. Now, what we can do as well is we can quickly go to view and catalog, and then we can go to that and download the data sheet and look at the specifics in and around there. all data sheets that we do work with have got the relevant information there. So I can just click on that and pull down the data sheet. And then we can scroll down here and we can see already what was already put into the sizing tool. Threat prevention, megabits per second, 780. So, and this is a performance based on our enterprise testing conditions, which we've already referenced in here. This is our enterprise testing conditions. We're not talking about a lab environment at this point. We're talking about generally what we consider to be an enterprise traffic blend to get to ensuring as close as a match as possible for for customers. Again, there's always going to be outliers. There's going to be customers that are looking at specific scenarios or specific types of traffic. And if we have to get into nitty gritty at that, we can. We do have support from our HQ in terms of looking at some of the advanced sizing techniques that we need to do. So if I was to look and take into account a customer and I was looking to make a recommendation based on the information that they've given me, which is roughly about 300 megs of throughput, so that's what we're assuming. What I can do is I can start to go through all of the different appliances that we recommend. So what I always look out for is ensuring this room for growth element that comes into play here. So when I see a 1530 and I see a room for growth between 10 and 20%, this is one of our SMB boxes, by the way, I would be concerned about recommending this appliance to a customer, even though for all intents and purposes, it will run at that speed. But what we're looking at then is a capacity of well over 90% in order to be able to facilitate that. So what does that mean in the real world? It means that if the customer is running roughly 300 megs of traffic through that box, that we are going to be hitting a ceiling pretty quickly in terms of underlying management and performance of the box, etc., etc. Where I start to get a little bit more comfortable is when we start to look in some of the other areas and we can start to see the room for growth slightly increasing. So we've got here 45 to 55%. We're saying here there's a maximum throughput for this particular box at 450 meg. Again, we're at 300 megs of traffic. So 45 to 55% is a nice starting point to be in. However, what we need to be mindful again is what else are they doing? What are they looking to do? There's other elements that you can turn on within the boxes, such as the likes of HTTP inspection or HTTPS inspection, which can then affect the performance of the box and can actually then push us up into other territories or slightly bigger territories. So moving down, if we look at the starter box where we're kind of coming into play here from a 3100. Now again, the difference between our SMB boxes, which are listed here, and the 3100s is the version of Gaia that they're running, just as an outlier. So we run what I consider to be full-fledged Gaia on anything that's a 3100 and upwards, but anything below that that fits into our SMB space runs embedded Gaia. Now the feature sets are the same. In general, we're giving the same security across them, but they work slightly differently. So looking at this box here, then a 3100, this is giving us a threat prevention throughput of 510 megabits per second, which falls comfortably within the remit of the 300 megs that we have here. And what we're giving is roughly then a room for growth element of 65 to 75%. What also needs to be what we also need to bear in mind at this point is that there is no assumption here that we're running standalone management or we're running it in standalone mode. That means where we're running the box both as a gateway and we're running management in here. This is assuming that you are using the gateway for its whole purpose, which is to be a gateway. Once we talk about standalone management, you could roughly expect probably 20 to 30% reduction in terms of performance, depending on what you're doing again on the box by running it in standalone management or standalone mode. We can then change that, and we can see, of course, the further up the throughputs that we go, the bigger the boxes tend to be. So again, looking at a gig, we can hit calculate here. We can see the recommended appliances. So these are the ones that we would kind of say will suit perfectly for the customer's needs. That's not to say that the other ones aren't recommended, but these are our latest and newest quantum series of appliances. So naturally, we're going to be kind of pushing those forward because we are now starting to announce end of life dates for these particular models. But again, they will all tick the box in general, but we can see the room for growth will vary depending on the appliance that we're using for this. Once we've decided then on the relevant appliance that we may wish to present to the customer at the desired throughput, what we can do then is we can generate a report out of that. So it's again very simple. As a partner, you can choose to either display the price or hide the price. The prices are all RRP, so I wouldn't worry about that. Generally, the price list is publicly available. But what we can do then is we can start to compare specific appliances. So we can look at different appliances and the different kind of top level statistics around them. Or we can just click generate report, put in the customer name here, hit generate, put in more comments if we need to, and then the end result will be a report that I can then download. And what we can do is we can view the report and the recommendations that we've made out of that. Here we go. So following through the report again, what we've got here is the gateway total throughput. Appliance mode, it's running only as a security gateway, and the sizing data has been provided by a user. So we're looking at Gen 5 security, threat prevention with or without sandblast. That includes all of these different blades here. And then we can start to understand the relevant appliances that we're recommending for a gig's worth of throughput. Now I can include or disclude various different appliances should I want to from the report. So again, it's just a tick box to ensure that I'm selecting what we feel is the best appliance for the customer in that particular scenario. And moving on from this, as I said, we can drop it down a level to less security, and you will then start to see that the appliances are now updating and changing to reflect just firewall, IPS, and application control. And again, we've got some nice room for growth in there, but the further down the tree, the less stuff we're running, the smaller appliances can then start to come into play for the customer. We can also size based on total users, but for the most scenarios that I tend to work with, I generally work with the throughput number that gives me an accurate piece. However, if you are concerned, if we are talking about multiple thousands of users, again, we can say, okay, let's, for example, put in 2,000 users into this, and we can do a calculation based on that. And then you can see here that the appliances that we're recommending just based on the number of users are starting to get up there. Again, we have other appliances coming into play, but don't forget what we talked about in relation to the room for growth. We always want to ensure that we're roughly sitting around the 50% utilization as a rough comfort zone for all the appliances. And don't forget, we're not assuming things like HTTPS inspection as well. If you do have a need for HTTPS inspection, you can reach out to one of the SEs that you're working with. And they can then take that back to HQ and just make sure that we are getting an appliance that is going to cope with the HTTPS inspection requirements as well for the customers. Finally, we can also start to size based on the virtual systems. So again, for those of you familiar with our VSX approaches, you know that we can run multiple instances of a checkpoint gateway and keep them isolated from each other. So again, what we can do is size based on that. And again, we can ensure, as per the data sheets, that we are encompassing the amount of throughput and then the appliance mode as well that we're doing. So ultimately, it falls back to how much throughput are we going to be running based on ingress and egress at the main points. But then if we're going to slice it up, we want to make sure that the appliance can deal with a multitude of different VSX licenses as well. So we can actually start to add those in there. So if I switch that to 25, for example, for a gig, you can see again, the appliances start to reflect and change in accordance with that. So when we're looking at running 25 virtual systems with a gig's worth of traffic, you can see that the appliances that we're advising are actually getting quite significant. And we want to ensure that we have got significant overhead in those appliances to be able to deal with those requirements for the customer. Once we are happy with this, we can then just hit the reset button and go back to basics at the bottom here, and then we can begin anew. So the idea really for this tool is to give us a rough idea of where we need to be aiming for when a customer comes to us and starts to inquire about the appliances. And as I said, we have got the SMB appliances in there, which have got decent coverage and decent throughput specifications in accordance with their data sheets. And then the slightly larger appliances that we start to come into play as the customer's requirements go up. With that, all that remains is for me to say thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this useful, this little snippet into our kit series, and tune in again for another one soon. Thank you.